Nyesom Wike on Thursday, met behind closed doors at the presidential villa Abuja. The meeting is coming on the heels of the building collapse 2 days after the former governor of Rivers State assumed duty as FCT Minister. The agenda of the meeting was not made public, but it may not be unconnected with the building collapse in Abuja on Wednesday, in which about 2 persons were feared dead and 37 persons wounded. It was expected that the minister would brief the president on the unfortunate event and the level of casualty recorded. Now, still with us right here in VOP this morning, joining us virtually, is a legal practitioner, Eze Eluche. And of course, we are expecting John Akurele to join us later in the program. Barrister Eze, welcome once again. Okay, so what possibly could be the agenda of the meeting between President Bola Tinubu and Nyesom Wike, the FCT Minister? What do you think could be the meeting? What could you think the meeting intends to achieve? Okay.
All right. Well, as it is, I think Wike has his job cut out for him already because just after he talked about bringing down structures that are illegally erected, one has brought itself down. And as it is, that structure.
But you know how Wike immediately assumed duty and made a lot of statements, that took over the airwaves. It's surprising that he just got, immediately after he was sworn in, he got his first job for him.
Oh, well. Barrister Eze Eluche is back online. Good morning once again, Barrister Eze Eluche. Well, we'd like for you to unmute your microphone. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. My worry with these meetings of appointees or political appointees or elected officials always running back to the presidency, to Aso Rock for instructions on even the most common of issues. It gives one goosebumps that what kind of government do we really have? Not too long ago, the Senate President, Fabio, had to rush back to Aso Rock in the course of screening of one of the ministerial nominees. Now, just because of a mere building collapse, a minister is running back to the presidency to get more authorization, more authority. One now begins to wonder, when he was governor of Rivers State, what did Wike do when there was building collapse? Did he have to run to the president, to anywhere? A basic issue that a minister who is supposed to be capable of addressing it finds that he has to go back to Aso Rock to do whatever. The whole essence of having ministers is to keep the presidency away from certain basics. So my worry is the whole idea of ministers or appointees having to run back to the villa for even the slightest of issues. That is what should concern Nigerians. Regarding the building collapse, buildings will keep collapsing as long as we have poor infrastructure, poor training facilities, poor maintenance. I mean, we have all the criteria that will keep on ensuring that buildings collapse. It is hoped that regulatory agencies, such as the Council for Engineers and others who are involved, will act as they should act. Because if they were acting effectively, these buildings will not be collapsing anyway.
Well, as it is now, we know that Minister of the FCT basically is holding forth for, the person that put him there. So the minister cannot take decisions all by himself. Don't you think that's why he would need to clarify on if he should carry on activities? Don't you think so?
Okay, if tomorrow there is a car accident at Babolada, he will run back to the Aso Rock. Or next day there is a drainage flooding in somewhere in Asokoro or in Kuje, he will run to the Aso Rock. Hey, let us be serious in this country, for goodness sake. That is why even when you don't screen effectively, when you nominate whoever you want for political reasons, you end up with characters who are not qualified, who cannot do what they should do. There is absolutely no reason for just a mere building collapse to be the reason why a minister will have to run back to Aso Rock. I mean, the whole idea is that if we do not let these political appointees understand that they have some level of autonomy, they have some level of responsibility, that they are put there for a purpose, not just to occupy buy bulletproof vehicles and have a big office. They're supposed to work. If they have to keep on going back to the presidency, what will the Mr. President be having time for? I mean, that's what I don't know the kind of president, but from all indications, it appears that we're going to have a one-man riot squad presidency, which is unfortunate. Like I said, the earlier example I gave was that of the Senate president, the head of another arm of government, having to rush back to the presidency because there was an issue with approving a minister. Now, I don't want to begin to imagine that even the head of the third arm of government, the judiciary, will have any cause or any reason, because they shouldn't have any cause or reason to have to rush back to Aso Rock. So whoever has been appointed to that position should face his duty squarely, and if he has no idea what to do, there's one thing to do which he can do: resign and get the hell out of office.
All right, now, isn't this one building collapse too many? Are there any plans for increased accountability and oversight in the construction industry?
Now, that is a more critical issue because we have the Council of Registered Engineers of Nigeria, which should have engineers helping to erect buildings. We have the NIA, the Nigerian Institute of Architects, which will also have architects drawing buildings. But the question we should ask ourselves is, how many buildings in this country go through this official, professional handling? And then, apart from even that, when you have the engineers and the architects, what of the building materials? How is there any group, or any agency of government that is going to make sure that the blocks which are molded satisfy basic quality assurances? Like in some areas, you can you can use a bag of cement to mold 20 blocks. In some, you can use the same bag of cement to mold 80 blocks. So, is there any checks and balances? So that is where government should be involved in regulatory, strengthening the regulatory mechanisms and the capacity of these professional bodies to monitor their members. Not running around that a building has collapsed, it becomes a media issue, they will go around. At the end of the day, nothing happened. A 15-story building collapsed in Lagos a few months ago. What has happened thereafter? The same thing continues to happen. So we should be more serious with ourselves in this country. If we really want to address this, it's not grandstanding, like the minister said when he was inaugurated, that he's going to be pulling down buildings, he's going to do this, he's going to do that. Now the very first test of capacity has cropped up, and what does he do? Run back to his master. Come on.
All right. Barry says, there's a saying, easier said than done. I think that's basically what clarifies the statement that you just made now. When one assumes a position, one thinks that possibly following, a certain modus operandi, that he could or she could effectively carry on their responsibilities. But let's look at most of these building developers and contractors not going along with the guidelines. You have the National Building Agency, who are meant to ensure that they go through with the mandate on the construction where the building is being erected and all the necessary requirements, specifically with the materials used to either erect that particular structure. For Wike now, who is the FCT Minister, do you think the usual approach that we know Wike is, as we know him for, in terms of either being too aggressive or literally speaking sometimes before, thinking, do you think that approach would work when it comes to situations like this? Remember, unfortunately, 2 lives were lost and a couple of persons got injured.
Well, in the area, for instance, for building collapse, they should have an engineer who is responsible for building approvals and such infrastructure. So the person one would have expected to even be frontal when a building collapses, it's not the minister per se. It is the professionals who are in the ministry of the Federal Capital Territory. But when you have a minister who is loquacious, he believes in media frenzy issues, he wants to be seen doing something at all times, even where he lacks capacity, this is the kind of things you get. There's a Wike who is a lawyer by training, who does not even understand what the proper mixture of cement and gravel is, has no business moving around a building collapse site, or maybe except to commiserate with the dead or the wounded, or to issue policy directives about what happens to such properties when there's a building collapse. But the nitty-gritty is reserved for the professionals in the Ministry of the Federal Capital Territory. I mean, we should learn to put square pegs in square holes. A similar thing will occur if, for instance, anything happens in the Ministry of Aviation, where you put a loquacious lawyer as the minister. What do you expect when a plane cannot even take off? Does he understand the procedures of even procuring planes or whatever, or even servicing them, the A, B, C, D checks? Does he understand it? So the issue is, Mr. President has made his choice for ministers. We only hope they can live up to expected demand, because Nigerians deserve and demand effective and good service. The Minister of the Federal Capital Territory has a lot of responsibilities, one of which is not to run back to the Aso Rock at the slightest issue that crops up, because many other issues will be cropping up. We call upon the Nigerian Institute of Architects and the other professional bodies which have relevance to building to up their game, because we cannot continue to have building collapsing every day, everywhere in Nigeria. It's not as if buildings don't collapse anywhere in the world. They do. But then the frequency and rapidity with which they collapse in Nigeria is astonishing. That shows that we have deep-rooted issues to address. Otherwise, it is a risk for anybody to move into any building, any land or high-rise building in Nigeria. As we're talking of building, you realize that virtually no fire extinguishing capacity exists in Nigeria for buildings above 10 floors. Now, if you don't have fire extinguishing capacity for above 10 floors, and you have people erecting 20, 25 floors, what is the implication if there's any fire in those buildings? These are what we should concern ourselves with. Yes, the building has collapsed, unfortunately, but then the role of government is to lay down policy and objectives that will guide building so that subsequent ones don't happen and not cry over spilled milk.
All right. We know that there's an issue with getting clearance to erect structures. Builders have complained that when they apply, these things don't come out. So we find people acquiring properties, land in areas where they shouldn't. And then while they are waiting for the approval to erect, they go ahead and erect, only for relevant authorities to come in later and say, okay, we are marking this building for the demolition. And then before you know it, that sticker or the X mark is removed, and that structure stays there for many more years. Now, what do you think we should do differently to ensure that, look, documents are processed as fast as they can be, and structures that are not meant to be where they are being erected are not even there at all? We're looking at the law now, the position of the law.
Virtually everything in Nigeria, every societal problem, the panacea is to tackle corruption. I mean, once people are indisciplined and corrupt, no matter, nothing is going to work. That's just the basic. So until we begin to address corruption, until we begin to place penalties for transgressions, we hold people accountable for what they're supposed to do, nothing will work in this country. Like you rightly mentioned, why will it take a 6-month period to get a building plan approval? The reason is those who are working in those areas, they make it impossible to get it judiciously and expeditiously so that you can grease palms. And once you begin to grease palms, I'll bet you can even erect a 20-story building in a marshland where ordinarily you should not erect more than a bungalow, perhaps. So unless we begin to have consequences for transgressions, when people do not do what they should do, they are punished effectively and publicly for it. When those who give approvals remain on their duty post after buildings, these buildings will continue to collapse. In all the building collapses in Nigeria we've heard, and that will happen tomorrow and next tomorrow, we have not heard that any approving officer or any engineer or any architect was penalized or sentenced to death. right from the one of the synagogue church, where over 200 people died in a building collapse. So the one that happened in Foreshore Close in Ikoyi, we have never heard of any penalty for anybody who was responsible for mass atrocities and mass deaths. So why will further buildings not collapse? So will it end up with running to the Aso Rock? Will it stop the next building from collapsing? No. Punish those who transgress, ensure that the effective monitoring mechanisms are in place, and then we can relax. And all boils down to corruption. Corruption, corruption. Once you address that, Nigerian problems are over.
All right, now let's look at what the minister said when he assumed office. He said structures are not meant to be where they are, will be brought down. They will go down. Those were his exact words. Structures that are, illegally erected will go down. Now, some pundits have said it may not be easy for the minister to carry out that threat. That because he also did state categorically that irrespective of who you are, whether you're an ambassador, a minister, regardless of who you are, if you're the owner of a structure that is not where it is meant to be, that structure will go down. So people are saying, no, this might not be easy for him to carry out. What do you make of that statement?
When ministers make such comments, you only laugh over it. Because what happens, even Aso Rock, when you look at the master plan of Abuja, the Aso Rock villa is an illegal structure. When you go by the master plan of Abuja.
I didn't get that.
So when you go by the master plan, the original master plan of Abuja,
yes,
and it's available, it's a public document. The current situation or position of Aso Rock villa makes it an illegal structure. It was not supposed to be there. That was part of the green verge. So when the minister comes and says anything like this where it should not be, will be pulled down, you only laugh over such braggadocious comments because they are not serious issues. They're not serious comments. So what was like when Elu was the minister of Abuja, he went to areas like Kubwa, which has more of a low or middle to low income people, and brushed down estates. Do that in Asokoro. We wouldn't do that in our home area because that is highbrow area where most of some ministers and former government officials live. So comments made by Wike is just like I keep on saying, he's a very loquacious fellow. He talks what he does not mean. He talks a lot. And when going back to his history, told us he takes a 40-year-old whiskey in the morning. I don't want to go to that. Yeah, but you take most of what Wike says with a pinch of salt, or even more than a pinch of salt, because they're not serious comments. Now it comes down, what is going to do? Run to Aso Rock. So let us address fundamental issues, address the structural issues in this country, address corruption, and not waste our time with just the comments of one minister or whatever.
And Barrister Ezeluche, we have tried to thank you so much for putting a lot of the questions we've asked you into proper context. But let's look at this scenario where in everything that is being done in Nigeria, as we do well know, there is always politics involved. When we talk about such protocols, when it comes to establishments and structures, that has to do with the lives of people. It almost feels in certain instances that we have heard about or experienced that the lives of the people are not number one in the list of priority when some policies are made or possibly some things are implemented. The situation in Abuja, one can say, is also replicated in Lagos. On how buildings or structures are erected and the procedures involved, and possibly these clients who have invested in most of these building structures do not want to go through with the necessary requirements, but rather having to go through the back door. Wike has promised and vowed that about 6,000 illegal erected structures, including slums, will be demolished. He literally warned everybody. But with the reality on ground now, what transpired, recently that Wike has to attend to, do you think this is achievable? If indeed he wants to go about this in considering that the priority is about the people, not necessarily whatever political inducement or political gain that any individual involved may get from this?
Well, the comment that he will destroy 6,000 houses. I mean, there are processes for everything. Even the person who built and the government allowed the building to go on, did not stop it when it should stop it, and allow a building to go on, and it's now completed. People are living inside it, and you wake up one morning and say they're going to destroy it. I mean, you have to pass through the legal process. Unless Wike is giving us the intention or that this government will be extra legal, ultra legal, will not give a damn about the law processes. There are processes to demolish a building. You serve notices, you hear from the person who's supposed to be at fault. And if the fault was due to the non-vigilance of government agencies, if those in the government offices approved it wrongly, or those in government in the approval agencies left over their rights, acquiesced, and allowed a building to be erected, you cannot just wake up and say you must destroy it without paying the necessary damages. So we have to be, it's not just the people who build that are at fault, it's also the government who failed to regulate that is at fault. So it's only Nigeria that's going to wake up one day and go and demolish structures and not pay compensation. I mean, we must always have the who into all these issues. How many buildings have the government put in place? How many building plan approvals for government buildings were even secured genuinely? So these are issues that the government must put into factor and not just wake up and go and destroy people's buildings. I mean, it's a very wrong way to do governance.
Question I want to ask you. You've touched on it already. The issue of compensation. Now, who should be compensated really? In what scenario should people be compensated? Those that applied, that did not get approval, and could not just wait to keep their lands, lying there, and decided to develop it, and then for somebody to come years later to say this is an illegal structure, shouldn't they get compensated? Because they did apply. Now, who should get compensation? Help us put that in perspective.
Well, it depends on what the issues are. For instance, if you waited for so long, you're not supposed to actually continue building without the approval being secured. So ordinarily, you're not supposed to do this against law. But then, it's also present that there are people building monitors in the ministry who are supposed to be watching to know what you're really doing. And then if they saw these buildings going up, and then only wake up after the building has collapsed, or maybe after you have erected your building, they now say, okay, this is an illegal structure, demolished. They also owe you a duty if it is passed through the legal processes to pay compensation. Okay. So what happens in most times, most instances, is that the person who actually goes to build might not even be the one who owns the land. It might be a developer who believes that well. And if at the end of the day things are not done well, the government has to be human, have to apply human instincts in these issues, and not just have a fiat and say, okay, because you did not secure an approval, then we're going to pull down, we're not going to pay you anything. I mean, there must be that balance. And in a country where most things have been wrong for decades, when I mean decades, people have gotten CFOs only to discover the person who issued the CFO was not the right authority to issue it. But they got the CFO from the ministry. They also got the building approval from a government agency. So we have so many things that have gone wrong, so the government cannot, in good faith, wake up one morning and decide we have to demolish an entire area irrespective of what personal rights people have. This exactly was what the former minister El-Rufai did in Kubwa. He had demolished an entire area without even listening to individual complaints. Until tomorrow, nobody has been paid compensation. So we hope that the government this time, yes, if you have to correct wrongs, you have to correct it in a democratic way. Since we say we're having a democracy, you have to factor in the people's wishes and the people's views into it. And not just because you have the power like Wike is doing, and he said that it's a number that is going to demolish 6,000. Have you even counted? Have you discussed with the owners of these buildings? Do you know why they erected it? Do you know which approvals they have? Or you already have the number in mind? Like I said, when Wike was appointed, I wouldn't be surprised if the Wadata Plaza of the PDP gets pulled down, or if the head office of the Labour Party gets pulled down for one reason or the other. Because if God to demolish your building, no matter where you are, who you are, government can do it. Because there will always be one I that was not properly dotted, or a T that was not properly crossed, And then they'll say, because of that reason, this house is illegal and we're going to demolish it.
All right.
But
Well,
a government that is democratic
you
will
mentioned
have to be.
Erufai now. You mentioned Erufai,
Yeah.
and we know that Erufai is adjudged one of the best ministers that the FCT has had, and he pulled down a lot of houses. What would be the difference if we can goes ahead to do same? Well, I can't hear you now.
So, sorry, I said, who adjudged Erufai one of the best ministers?
A lot of people
I
actually.
mean, because, well, a lot of people, but I'm saying that those whose house were pulled down in Kubwa will not adjudge him that. They will adjudge him as one of the most insensitive, vicious ministers. So it depends on who you ask.
But Arufai had a master plan for the FCT. I think he felt that the only way that could be achieved
That's another
is
problem.
the aggressive nature of infusing that. I think a couple of persons felt that that was a necessary action to take if Abuja needed to take the kind of shape it was supposed to have. But ever since Arufai left, most of the disciplinary measures that were, applied when it comes to erecting structures in certain places went down. That did not continue. So don't you think his approach was, preferable to the minister who just left?
No, I don't think so. Because like you said El-Rufai has a master plan. No, he personalized it. You don't personalize government. You create and erect institutions that can be sustaining. You create procedures and processes that can outlive you. That is how you judge who is a good minister or who is a good governor. But when you personalize hoggish behavior, you personalize the use of force, because you are the minister, you can do whatever you like and get away with it. That is not good governance. So from my own perspective, if a minister had put in place mechanisms, structures, processes that are infallible, that make sure that if you apply for a building plan and you are qualified to get it, you get it expeditiously. That is what makes a good minister. Because the rot in the FCT is still there. I mean, you can even look at when the minister was claiming this, when Wike was claiming he would build down so many houses. The directors who were with him there were just looking at him and say, okay, this is a new kid on the block. After 1 or 2 weeks, he will cool down. So that's how these civil servants look at you, because you are talking based on your own personality, based on your own person. You are not putting an institution in place or structures in place. So, I mean, I don't think thuggish behavior is ideal. There must be some element of good governance, element of processes. That is what makes a good system.
All right, then. Thank you very much, Barrister Eze Eluchie, for staying with us on the program. Well, that's how far we can go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me on board.
Good. All right, so we'll go into business. We'll take a break. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll get into business, entertainment, and sports. Stay with us.